Men, do you ever feel like you just can't get ahead? Like you're misunderstood? Like you have no one to talk to that truly hears you?
And women, are you often frustrated, hurt, and saddened in your relationships with the men in your life?
What if there were a community of like-minded men going through the same challenges that would support, hear, and understand what you're going through?
Working together in unison to create understanding, intimacy, and strong connections. That's the Way of the Illuminated Warrior.
Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show is a forum of candid conversations for men and women about men. Being a man today is not always easy. Until now.
All right, so it's been a minute since Beth Parojcic has been in the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show house, and she is back joining me today for another candid conversation as we discuss today's topic, which is attachment. So welcome back to the show, Beth.
Thank you very much, Waska. It's absolutely my pleasure. When we reconnected after a bit of a hot minute break there, I was super excited. Like my heart just jumped and I went, oh my God, we got to start doing this again. So I'm very, very honored to be here. My pleasure.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we always have good, engaging conversations, and I'm sure this one proves to be one also. Yeah. So awesome. Let's talk about attachment. So
yeah, where are you going with that? What are you thinking?
I just came up with this today, but it's a very valid topic that I think we all pretty much could relate to. So, in the Buddhist philosophy, attachment and avoidance are the basis for humor and suffering. That's I definitely believe that to be true. So there's numerous things that we could be attached to. It could be people, it could be substances, it could be various ways of being. And ultimately, I believe that, these attachments culminate in codependency more often than not, which keeps us from really experiencing the freedom, we do suffer. So there are noted different attachment styles, so we could talk about a couple of those. I mean, and they're not exclusive. There are different ones. But I do believe in the things that I read and experienced that, most of these attachments occurred like when we made these early childhood decisions. And these early childhood decisions could have been, from 0 to 7 or the next 7 years or whatever it was. And they're not even necessarily conscious decisions, but these are decisions that we made that have affected us throughout our lives. Of course, the environment, and there are other factors that go along with that. But these are more than likely the way these attachments have culminated in our lives and that we're dealing with today. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
100%, 100%. And to understand too, that those attachments that we became attached to when we were youngsters were means of survival.
Yes.
So when you're, obviously, and I'm sure our listeners are smart enough to figure this out, but I'll say it anyway. When you're little, you entirely depend on your environment, whoever your caretakers are, your parents, teachers, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're a little kid and you don't know the difference between what's good for you and what's not good for you, you rely totally on that. Problem is that when you get to be, I'm going to say 16 and 25 and 35, and we don't need to go up to how old Beth is. We're going to do that. These attachments beg to be reflected upon, because at certain ages they don't serve us any longer, but we're so accustomed to behaving a certain way. We're attached to the belief of what someone told us we needed to believe in, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm really happy you chose this topic, because there are a lot of moving parts to it. There are a lot of tentacles to it. And I think we can really help our listeners probably with some questions throughout this conversation of how they can contemplate their attachments and reflect upon them and change them if necessary. And it's not always easy work, but that's okay. That's okay. We can do difficult things.
Yes, very true. Well, I think it begins with the awareness, that these attachments are causing suffering. And again, very often they're causing these codependent relationships, which affect how we live. And, again, hence, if you look at it, it is suffering. If we're not enjoying well-being, if we're not enjoying relationships that both parties feel like that they are being heard, that they feel like they're being loved, that they feel like they're being acknowledged, that they feel like there's balance and equanimity there, then, it's more than likely it is codependent, which I'm not saying all relationships are, but we're talking about how these attachments affect relationships. So,
Mhm.
so let's, and I just picked the ones that I know are most common.
Yeah, let's dig
And
in.
yeah, so the fearful avoidant, it's called the fearful avoidant,
Fearful of what? Okay, write that one down.
yeah.
Fearful avoidant. Okay.
And then we'll discuss how these affect us in our adult relationships. And again, they definitely more than likely relate back to the decisions and the environment and the stimulus and the way we developed or were stunted, if you could look at it that way, as kids, or
Right.
young people. So the fearful avoidant, they may have problems with intimacy. Hence, I mean, the names are pretty descriptive of what they are. So in
Sure.
an adult relationship, there could be problems with intimacy, investing like emotionally in that relationship. And that could be also, social situations, doesn't have to be just romantic, but in all aspects also. A lot of times, the fearful avoidant is unwilling, to share thoughts and feelings and emotions with other people. And obviously, these things are going to affect your relationship with somebody else. So,
Yeah,
is that something that you could relate to, or what's your
totally.
feeling about that fearful?
Yeah, I totally can, Waska. Fear, even to just take the first word, fearful, is so much at the core of I can even probably go out on a limb and say almost the core of every crazy thing that people do is that we can peel it all the way back down to a fear of something.
Mm,
And going back to my example of being a little kid, we're taught to be afraid of so much. It was like they're just squishing our little spirits down, our little spirit down, our little
yeah,
spirits down, under the guise that it's good for you. And so when you think back to it, even when you're just a tiny little baby in your mom or caregiver's arms, they teach you to be afraid already.
yeah,
So it's no wonder that this comes up time and time and time again in our adult life. I'm thinking of workplace. I'm thinking of relationships, like you mentioned. There's just so many ways that you find out that you're fearful, and I think that's one of the contemplative questions maybe we could offer to
yeah,
our listeners is start really basic, like what's not going well in your life that you'd like to see
yeah.
change. Could be a behavior, could be new
Sure.
job, there's all kinds of things. What's not going well in your life right now that you'd like to see changed? And once you identify it, how do we find the fear that's behind it? Because there's got to be some fear in there somewhere.
Mm,
And the avoidant part I really like as well. I like the two words together, because what fear will do is promise us an opportunity to avoid something.
mhm. Good point.
Right? I'm even thinking to the point of having what I call crucial conversations. We all
Hmm.
need to have adult crucial conversations from time to
Sure.
time, but we're so damned afraid. We're so afraid. I cannot speak to my boss that way. I cannot speak to my
Right.
spouse that way. I
Yeah.
cannot speak to my bank manager that way. Certainly can't speak to my doctor that way. Like, we will not be having
Right.
crucial conversations with our medical team because they know everything,
Right.
right? So where I'm going with that is that I guess we have to put our big boy and big girl pants on eventually and say, this is not working for me. I know this isn't working for me. And kind of, it's okay to make some jots of things that you'd like to cover in these crucial conversations. Because once that little chip away of fear and the avoidance happens, once you stop doing that, it becomes easier and easier and easier to do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm trying to think of a personal example, because I've got 1,000 that really correlates here. Can you think of anything that comes to
Oh
mind
yeah. Yeah. So I'll say I'll say I've been accused of, which it's probably pretty accurate, of being a fearful avoidant in relationships. So if I not to analyze my own self, awareness, but I think back about, I can remember when I was probably 2 years old, believe it or not, is my earliest memory of a feeling that I was being abandoned by my parents. They were going to Atlantic City, and they left me with my grandmother, and my grandmother left me in her room, and I was screaming and crying. And I remember
Oh,
this vividly. I remember seeing the street light out the window, and I felt like I was being abandoned. and I really believe that that carries through to my relationships to this day. Well, does she love me enough? Is she going to leave me? So I have looked at that, and I'm still looking at it, that, why I am not fully, I don't want to say capable, but willing to, or comfortable with, or, going to take that chance to, like, okay, not think that way, that she's going to leave or she's going to abandon me or whatever it is. Point being, I am fearful about it. And they say the opposite of fear is love, So in a sense, maybe I'm not feeling that love that I want, or that I need, that I think I have to have. And, like, just like my parents abandoned me, which they didn't, but that was my
Yeah.
experience at that time that I've carried through. So I was fearful, and I avoid, putting that intimacy out there and being truly vulnerable sometimes, with that. So, I could acknowledge that. So, yeah, I could relate to that. And I think the awareness of it, I know that about myself. So, and it's nothing new. So I'm still working on that.
Yeah. Now, would you, I have two questions to ask you about that. Does it come down to, let's pretend you're in a brand new relationship and you're getting to know this person, and you're starting to think, hey, I think there's a bit of a jive here. I think and then she says that she's going out shopping for a little bit for an hour or something like that. She's got to go run some errands. And the next thing you know, it's like an hour and a half and she's still not back. Would that cause you some angst? Like, she's abandoned me, she's not coming back? It's not that minute, right?
Not necessarily that. And a lot of it, I think, for me anyways, is subconscious. So it's, I don't really consciously think, oh, she's going to abandon me. I just have put this together as, my style of attachment. And I think it happens more when intimacy starts, when I start getting closer.
Okay.
Those feelings, they're triggered. They're like those engrams, like something triggers that in me. And a lot of the times, which I think with a lot of these attachments, it's subconscious. So
Yeah.
I'm doing my best, is to be more conscious of it, and kind of like nip it in the bud, or look at it and say, okay, well, I'm not that, infant anymore, and I'm not, and then wasn't abandoned. Like, be here now and go with this experience, and it's not to say that the relationship is definitely going to work out anyway in this time and space, but I could be more aware of it, look at it and know what that, that attachment and that avoidance, that fearful avoidance has, brought into my life. Yeah.
What does it look like to you, Waska? Is it like a little panic in your chest? Or like, what makes you go, oh shoot, there's that thing again? There's that thing again that's coming up.
I didn't really plan on sharing so much about myself, but hey, listen, vulnerability. I talk about this with the guys all the time. If I'm not willing to put it out there, then I can't expect anybody else to. So for me, what I've discovered is I do something called fuzzing out. I just
Okay.
yeah, because internally, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to feel that hurt. I don't want to push myself necessarily into whether it's more intimacy or whatever it is. So I'm like, it's kind of like the picture goes like this, or like on Charlie Brown, like,
Yeah.
It's like it's there, but it's more, it's fuzzy, and they're like, oh well, it's not really clear, so I don't have to deal with this right now. So that's my way of dealing with it, which is not very effective, which is dysfunctional, and does, again, leads to codependence. So but again, I'm aware of it, so I can do something, and I am doing something about it. So it's interesting. This process for me started when I was about 3 years old, and I'm years old now, a few years later, quite a few years later, and I'm still growing and learning and figuring it out. So it's
well, that's that. Thank you for sharing. I did not mean to put you on the spot,
No,
and you
that's
can
okay.
certainly, you can edit that out if you need to, but I would suggest not to do that,
It's
because
all
I
good.
think very, very valuable information there. Would you tend to disclose that to the woman that you're kind of getting jivey with? Would you disclose that to her?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of thing I'm going to lead with and be like, hey, I'm a fearful avoidant. You want to go
Yeah.
on a date? You know, Which honestly, this is, I don't want to say it's new, but it amazes me. Like I thought I knew myself all these years. I'm still constantly evolving in my own personal growth and learning more about myself. So,
Mm-hmm.
so moving forward, yeah, that is something that again, I'm not going to lead with it like, hey,
Yeah,
Waska,
no,
you're
no, no,
full
no.
avoidant.
Yeah.
Um,
That's, that's not what I meant. I just meant that
yeah, yeah,
in those spaces in time when we're getting close to people, that vulnerability can be so beautiful and
yeah,
scary and, all of it. But having been on the receiving end of relationships with guys who weren't willing to
yeah.
disclose stuff like that, it would have been so much more helpful.
Well,
Uh,
of
yeah,
course.
yeah, right.
Absolutely. Well, that's one thing I will say that I think it's like Crazy Horse, the Lakota, medicine person, the truth is bulletproof. So
Mm,
I speak my truth. I try my best to be compassionate and not hurt anybody's feelings, but I believe that like if this is the way I feel, I'm going to tell you,
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
it's not always easy to say. It's not always easy for somebody else to hear, but I think it is bulletproof in the sense that, you're doing it's a higher vibrational way of being. So yes, it may be hurtful, to myself or somebody else, but ultimately, I think that's the best way to be, to be truthful in a relationship. So I am always very truthful, and
Awesome.
as my feelings develop in a relationship, sometimes I look at it first, and a lot of times I just spew out things that I'm thinking, and more often than not, I just say what I'm thinking. So then that's an
I bet you're a blast to be in a relationship
Oh,
with. That
I'm
would
sure
be
if you
amazing.
surveyed my previous partners, I'm sure they'd have various comments about that. But I try to keep it fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So bringing ourselves back to the topic of attachment, I can tell, and that's because neither one of us is 16 anymore. When you're just
yeah.
learning to get to be in relationship, you're not the little puppy dog. The attachment. Women can very commonly do this. They become the little puppy dog, and they'll do whatever you say and whatever you want because I'm really afraid to be by myself. So
Mm,
I'm going to make sure that whatever Waska wants, and even subliminally, I'm paying
yeah.
attention to all of it so that I can be the little puppy dog that says, please love me, please love me, please love me. And so it's not unlike the abandonment thing that you're experiencing, although that's probably PTSD.
Mm,
Um, but we're accustomed to, and society's changing, thank goodness, but it's taking us a long time. Women are just trained and socialized into believing that we're no good without the partner.
yeah.
Like so
It's
that
so
makes you
untrue. Right.
be fearful. I mean, he might not like that. He might not like that. I'll give you a prime example. I still do this to this day. Talk about being vulnerable. It just came into my noggin. Um, I've been married to my husband for 31 years, so we've been together 33 years. And he is a very, very sharp dresser. He's James Bond reincarnated. Like he just always looks good. And people tell him that all the time. Everybody knows that about him, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I dress the way that I choose to dress, but I sometimes do it still to please him. I'm afraid to put something on that I think is really, really sharp or I think is perfect, because what if I get the look from the sharpest guy that I know? The look of,
Mm,
and he doesn't ever say to me, "You're not going to wear that, are you?" Like he
yeah.
never says that.
So
But I can,
if I could just interject for a second. So what you've been describing is really the second one we could discuss. It's insecure attachment.
oh, perfect.
So
Perfect.
it's a
Yeah.
good lead in. So I just wanted to put that out there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
There you go. Insecure attachment. Oh, so what am I really thinking? Is he gonna leave me or stop loving me because of the sweater I'm wearing? That's ridiculous. Of course, it's ridiculous intellectually, but in here,
Emotionally.
something has taught me in society, probably my religious upbringing and my upbringing, small town Ontario, where the only thing a girl did was graduate high school and get married and have babies. Like that.
Mm.
That's how old I am, actually. That was still a thing. But like at any cost. And I remember, not overtly, but I remember my mother always aiming to please dad. Always aiming to please. Your dad doesn't like that, kid, so don't do that. Your
Mm.
dad won't like that, so don't do that, kids. You're like, it was always.
Yeah.
Or I would say, I might say something like this when I was 10 years of age. Mom, can we have hamburgers for dinner tonight? Like, we hadn't had hamburgers for a long time. No, your dad doesn't like burgers on a Thursday, so we can't have it.
Mm,
So I see where a lot of that comes from in my, but it's still there. Like it's
sure.
still there. I'll be in a store picking up a sweater. I'm like, I wonder if my husband's gonna like that.
So let me ask you, so how much of this have you even like had the inquiry to find out? How much of it's actually just up in Beth's head over here, or how much
Oh,
of it's actually true?
no,
that he feels that way?
99% of it's made up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's just my automatic go-to though. Like, bang. And more as I grow and learn, to your point too, always growing, always learning. I keep using this as an example. I'll pick up a sweater in a store and I feel it. I feel the thing go through. I wonder if he'll like it. And I stop. I put the sweater down, put my hand over my heart, and I say to myself internally, that's not yours, Beth. Yours is to decide for yourself whether you like the
Yeah.
sweater. But I'm talking, I bet you I'm 5 years into these inquiries of this
Wow.
particular issue. So I'm
Yeah.
glad we're talking about it, because now I feel like I'm
Yeah.
releasing. I'm in a therapy session with Waska.
We'll be right back after this.
Do you sometimes feel down, lost, or lonely? Are your finances feeling sluggish? Can your relationships use a healthy tune-up? Don't fear, bro. Help is here. Experience the benefits of connecting with other men who are going through similar challenges. Be supported in our safe, sacred, and inspiring monthly telecircle with the Brotherhood of the Illuminated Warriors. Connect with Waska for one-on-one mentoring with the first session completely free. What have you got to lose? Check out illuminatedwarrior.com or send an email to waska@illuminatedwarrior.com. You're invited to step up your game and join us. You'll be glad you did.
Maybe our listeners can understand through both of our examples that it takes practice, it takes
Yeah.
diligence, it takes resilience, it takes vulnerability, it takes doing that. Where someone listening to this might say, seriously, Beth, you pick up a sweater and the first thing you think of is whether your husband's going to like it or not? Like, that's ridiculous, right?
Well,
of course.
if you think back, even again, you're going back as far as you could think, and I'm not saying this is necessarily true of you, but part of that, insecurity is, you're wondering, does my partner love me? Does he approve of me?
That's the one. It's the approval. Yeah,
Mm,
that's the one.
yeah.
Will he approve of this? As if that sweater is my identity, or that's the core of who I am, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a quandary for me, but and interestingly enough, that's the only, I don't worry about anything of that nature. Like, what am I wearing today? Well, my sister-in-law like it. Or we're going to a family gathering later
Yeah.
today. Is my sister-in-law going to like this outfit that I'm wearing? No, just him.
Well,
Just
it's
him.
different relationship, right? This is
Yeah.
a romantic love relationship. And so, how often, or, because you already know that it's 90% up in here, do you speak with him about that,
Mhm.
to get over this? I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I said to him, I probably started this about 5 years ago, where I really became aware. This is kind of weird, Beth. Like, you're getting dressed in the morning, worried about whether your husband likes. I started to go like this to myself. So I explained it to him. And I said, at the time, I said, for a full week, you're not allowed to say anything about anything that I'm wearing, or right. Because sometimes I can't, like, he just doesn't do it because he's not a goofball. He's very, very cognizant, but I'll just get the vibe from him, maybe, that he doesn't like the shoes or the boots or something like
now
that.
what's the
And
vibe? Okay, you get
yeah,
the vibe. What's the vibe? Just to see if this is actually just up in here, or is it actually accurate? What's the vibe?
the vibe is, I feel, which isn't true. I know it's not true, but I feel like he's looking me up and down as if to say, And he
Maybe
could
he's
be
saying,
yeah,
maybe
exactly.
that's
Well,
what he's
then
saying,
I
right?
used to try to pin it on him. I used to try to say, if you think I look great, then it's your responsibility to say that, so that I feel better about myself, which is ridiculous.
It's
which
not
is
ridiculous, and that's a really big thing also, which I have heard, through the course of my relationships also. And I discussing this with guys in circle and all. I'm not the only one that's experienced this. I think, wow, she looks beautiful, she looks wonderful, she looks hot, but that's not enough. I need to put that out there and tell her, well,
right.
hey, honey, you look great. I really like that outfit. Just because I'm thinking it, like, as crazy as it sounds, I used to think like, well, of course she knows that's what I'm thinking. Well, no, she doesn't know that's what I'm thinking. She has
Right.
no idea, and she wants to hear that. She, benefits from hearing that. I benefit from telling her that, but yet I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's really important to like actually express these things, especially when we want to compliment our partners. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. All people in relationships take note of that, because that's really, really important.
Yeah.
That's really, really important. So, any more to say around the insecurity part where you're concerned?
Well, I think these are good, pointers that we're putting out there. So I think that's pretty, illustrative, whatever the word is.
I hear you.
I
I
think we've
hear you.
illustrated the fearful, avoidant, and the insecure, and so of course, again, there's other ones, but I'll say the best one to be would be the secure attachment style, which I won't say it's the rarest, but it's this
Oh,
is somebody who actually has done a lot of work, and doesn't allow themselves to get into these codependent relationships, because they will look at them, they will do what's necessary, but they're more trusting in their relationships. A lot of times the relationships last longer because they're communicating, they're putting their feelings out there. Usually insecure attachment styles have good self-esteem,
mm-hmm.
so they're not like, oh, am I good enough? Am I, does she love me? Does he love me? And they will seek help when they need help, whether it's counseling or whatever else. So the secure attachment style obviously is the healthiest one, that, hopefully we all aspire to, and
Mm-hmm.
lends itself to having healthy relationships that aren't codependent, that are, good communication, and hopefully everybody feels, valued and supported and loved in those relationships.
And
Yeah.
there we go back to what we were talking about this entire discussion is doing the work that it takes on oneself to become secure in ourselves. Make sure your self-esteem is relatively intact. I'm not sure that anybody's got it all figured out, but relatively intact. So boundaries that you're aware of for yourself. So if that attachment becomes unhealthy, you're strong enough in yourself to be able to say, you know what, that's not good for me.
Yeah.
That's not good for me.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? Or
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
the sense of worthiness too, so that unlovability, that unworthiness, that really strikes all of us in different ways,
Yeah.
shape and form, in ways and shapes and forms. But again, to practice the skill of saying, just be curious with yourself, saying,
Yeah.
that doesn't feel right, doesn't look right, doesn't seem right. And if that's what it feels like and looks like, and you have to do something about it. You have to have that commitment to yourself to say, shoot, that requires a little bit of journaling, or that requires a little bit of silent contemplation, or that requires, and yet we're so busy, right? That makes
Well, that's why things don't change also. But those are really great points. And the inquiry, I mean, the inquiry is kind of like the unknown. So I think that's really great point. Just ask those questions, be curious, because that's where, things actually can develop and change and grow. That awareness. Yeah. And we've
well,
talked
yeah.
about this before. You said the silent contemplation or the meditation, magical things happen there also, just clearing and calming your mind and just going deep, and looking at and feeling like, why do I feel this way? Is it just like you were talking about before? Why am I thinking like he's thinking that? Well, let me just look at it from a different perspective, like, I don't know what he's thinking. Maybe I should ask him what he's thinking,
Yeah.
just leaving that inquiry and that, letting those silent contemplations, come on in and open you up, because that's, I think that's where we could develop empathy, the willingness to adapt and change and grow, and, mentioned it before also, the acceptance. I think acceptance is really
Yeah.
important and big, accepting where I am at, accepting where you're at, and realizing we're different, and that's
Yeah.
okay. That's
Yeah.
the spice
And
of
that's
life,
okay. That
right?
absolutely. And can we find, oops, hitting my microphone. Can we find that delicate balance sometimes? We're talking about intimate relationships, right? Like
Yeah.
partnered relationship. Can we find that balance, that kind of seesaw, that teeter-totter that just goes back and forth? And this is okay. This is okay. This is okay. It's when we start to go like this, that, Houston, we have a problem. Like that's a big problem. But if we can do that, but you and I align very well as friends in this, is in that we honor and respect our curiosity. We honor and respect our spiritual practices, the meditations or the journalings, and willingness to take responsibility.
That's
so
big.
when those unhealthy attachments appear with practice, I mean, I've said that like 10 times now in this conversation, it takes
It's
practice.
important. Yes, it does.
It's a lot of practice, and not sure that you're ever going to get to that finish line. It's just,
Okay.
It is forever evolving. But I guarantee our listeners, if you practice this beautiful art of contemplation, there's a myriad of different ways you can do it. With practice, it does get easier.
Yes.
Don't you find? Like you can go
Absolutely.
back and analyze your little 2-year-old self in that abandonment situation much easier now than you would have when you were 25, right? So you're willing to do that work, and you're willing to commit to oneself, which then builds our self-esteem. So then you're not dealing always in the unworthiness part. You feel worthy, or even as something as, I find this fun. People will probably roll their eyes and go, she finds that fun. Contemplating.
Stop judging yourself. Don't be attached to that feeling, Beth.
Right? Is I'm forever evolving and changing my list of my core values, which would have been different when I was in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Now I'm in my 60s. It changes. And I would recognize an unhealthy attachment to a prospective partner. And I'll even, because I'm partnered for a long time and I have no intention of leaving my husband, I'll use another example. I'll even use this with my bank manager. So I, pretend my bank manager leaves and there's a new bank manager, and I'm going in to make sure I meet him or her. My number one core value is curiosity. And when I meet people for the first time, social situations or whatever, I'm kind of hard on them. If they don't appear to be curious, like one of the worst things you can probably say to Beth, because then I will not become attached to you. Like, you're not going to be my kind of person. You're not going to be my friend. Is that people will say something like, well, they find out what you do for a living, or you start to have conversation. It's very clear that I'm new age, spiritualistic-y kind of, that's my bag. And they'll say something like, oh, well, that's interesting. I would never do that, because really I turned out just fine. I'm done. So they're not even curious enough.
Well, yeah.
It's interesting. It's very,
all kinds. Yeah.
Interesting to me. Right now, I've never been a goofball either. I will never be, and I have no intention of being unkind. I'll just know, though, like I'll know that's not a person that I need to be attached to. So I guess that comes with spiritual growth and contemplation as well. Looking at what my core values are, hoping and praying, and it usually happens that the people I engage with in my life, like yourself, match pretty much all of them. You don't have to get all of them, but pretty much all of them. Yeah. You're my kind of person, right? Or you're my kind of bank manager, or you're my kind of whatever. That I find having those core values, which is a little bit like a form of setting boundaries for yourself, when one of them is being crossed. And so therefore, how attached do I want to be in that relationship? Would that be fearful avoidance?
I think the big point is that we don't want to be attached. You could have all these core values in alignment and all, but why be attached? Because that's kind of the basis of suffering. When we're attached, to something, or we want to avoid it. That's where that personal, animus comes in. I think that we suffer. So you could have similar core values or not, but not being attached is a lot healthier,
Okay, so I like where you're going with that. So I'm going to bring it back to me in my therapy session with you. So I really like what you were saying. You brought up something that I'll take to heart, Waska, is that even in meeting a new acquaintance, check marking whether these people, this new person, aligns with more core values, my core values, is a form of attachment
Absolutely.
unto itself, right? As opposed to, oh, that person's interesting because they're curious. That person's interesting because they're creative. That person's interesting. That's all. So it's still my list, but I'm not purposely attaching myself to it with any intent of doing that. That's very cool. That's
Yeah.
very, very cool.
Well, again, going full circle back to like the Buddhist philosophy of being liberated. So it's the attachment and avoidance. So, saying, well, they don't align with my core values. I'm avoiding them. They're out of the club. I don't, so those are the two, if you really think about it, the things that we avoid and the things that we cling to, that's where the suffering comes from. If you really,
Yes.
really think about it. I know that's true for me. In my mind, I'm like, well, I really want this, or I need this, or whatever it is, that I'm really trying to get this thing. I'm suffering, rather than just letting it be and like, okay, just trusting, it sounds cliche or esoteric, trusting that the universe has our backs and that it's all
Absolutely.
going to work out, and just going with the flow, so to speak. That's what
Yeah.
I've been doing lately. I'm just really, really like flowing, like just
Beautiful.
seeing where things go and not pushing things. And because I have a tendency, like, I consider myself up to be a master manifester, and I not to sound like whatever.
No, do
I
it.
pretty much get whatever I want,
Hmm.
for the most part. If I
Yeah.
really set my mind on something, so I think about that a lot. I'm like, I could get it because I have the resources. I'm intelligent. I can be manipulative. I have to look at those things because sometimes I am manipulative.
Right.
I stop myself as soon as I realize I'm doing that because, okay, why am I doing this? Why am I saying this? Why am I, putting this out there? Is this really serving me? Is this really serving the other person? So again, to me, it's like the awareness and really like self-checking and, self-correcting also,
Hmm.
because we all, make decisions. They're not always the best decisions. So acknowledging, being responsible, which you spoke about a little bit before, and then
Hmm.
moving forward because change is inevitable and growth is optional. And for myself, I want to keep growing.
I
So
love that.
so
Yeah.
I make mistakes, I'm gonna own it, and then I'm gonna move forward from there.
And to your point of the universe always has our back. One of the things that I repeat repeatedly inside my own head when I become attached to a situation that I want to control, I want it to go a certain way, is I just remind myself that the highest good is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that might not be what Beth thinks is supposed to happen. It's just the highest good and the best experience will always be in there somewhere.
Yeah, as long as we are not fearful, right? Getting back
Right.
to that fearful or insecure, or so that comes to that secure attachment. If we're secure enough to say, okay, let's let it be, let's let it flow, then yeah, I agree with that. The highest
Yeah.
and best will happen, but we have to have that faith and that love and that acceptance, and that curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
That's where the magic can really happen, where a lot of magic can really, really happen. Really good topic for us to cover.
Yeah,
I it's a good one. And I again woke up this morning not knowing what we were going to talk about. And as soon
me
as
neither.
you sent me your text and said that's the topic, I went, we're gonna have a lot to say about this. A
Yeah.
lot to say about this. It's a really,
Well,
really good one.
we'll give a little shout out to our mutual friends. So the way I picked the topic was, though, I
Oh yeah.
reading these wonderful books by Simran.
Mm-hmm.
So I just opened it up, and that's the page I came to. I'm like, I'm gonna open it up and see what the topic's gonna be. So, and it was attachment. I'm like, okay, that's what we're going
Brilliant.
with. So
Brilliant. And you know what? That's the way I read her material too. I have all of
yeah,
her books as well. I don't read them front to back. I just open and see what the message is, like oracle cards, right? It's just
yeah,
there's always something valuable. Oh, that's amazing.
yeah. Well,
Oh
that's
no,
what she
so she's come
suggests
into the
also.
conversation. Yay.
Yes, yes. Well, that's how I started off doing this is because of Simran, really. She invited me on her show and we had some really good engagement. She's like, "Oh, you should do your own show." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so, yeah. So, thanks, Simi.
Yay. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, this has been wonderful. So, any closing thoughts? I think we put out some really good stuff out there. Hopefully the audience has got some jewels of wisdom there,
Oh,
or
I'm sure. We're so full of amazing wisdom that
We're so full of,
we're
yeah.
awesome. So no, our self-esteem is well intact
Oh,
right
yeah.
now, right? No,
I'm not attached to what people think of me.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither. And I'm going to go change my outfit now because I'm afraid my husband's not going to like what I'm wearing today.
Ask him first. Let him pick it out.
Yeah. Just to remind people that this is an ever evolving process, and this thing about attachment requires that, I'm going back to it, but this is just the ending comments, that commitment to practice, and that commitment to understand that that's not healthy. Like that statement from Buddha, the Buddha thing is perfect. It's perfect and a really good place to start. So I suggest anybody who's listening, find some time in the next day or so is to sit down with pen and paper if you want to, or go for a nice walk in nature or something and say, where am I unhealthily attached to something or someone? And just start there.
Yeah.
Just start there, take it easy, and just start exploring, peeling back the layers of the onion, and have fun with it if you possibly can, because it can be fun. It's hard work, but it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
How's that for an ending? Go have fun with that.
I like it. So yeah, and I'll just reiterate, yeah, the curiosity. So be curious. So if you've picked up anything, or if you didn't know about the attachment styles, or you relate to any of these, just being curious, being open, and just looking at your own affect and the way you maybe are attached or not attached, or you cling or you crave, and just going with that. And like Beth said, get out in nature. You could do some journaling, whatever it is. It's the awareness and moving one step forward at a time. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, with that, hopefully we'll see you again in the Illuminated Warrior house there, Beth.
I will be back. Can't get rid of me now.
Okay, excellent. So, all right, well, let's continue to illuminate our paths with loving kindness. Until next time.
Namaste, dear friend. Lots of love.
Namaste.
Bye.
Visit IlluminatedWarrior.com if you'd like to go deeper and find out more about what's available within the Illuminated Warrior Men's Transformational Community. Tune in next time for more candid conversations for men and women about men on the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show. Until next time, illuminate your path with loving kindness.